Hello and welcome back to Seagulls Central. I'm Adam MacDonald and thank you so much for tuning in, as always, to another show on the channel, another episode, another video where we're here to talk about Brighton and Hove Albion again. It's been an interesting few weeks, an interesting few months for Brighton because most of the videos I've done on this channel have been pretty positive. Even some of the ones where we've done more feature-based things and ranking players, etc., have been pretty positive. We've been, I remember going through the squad trying to rank them and I literally couldn't really say anything negative about any player. And now things feel a little bit different. We're coming up to the Christmas period. We played our last game at the Amex before Christmas. And we've had a tricky couple of games and it could look even trickier in a period which I think many Brighton fans would have said was a kind of a period where we all thought we might get through it with a decent number of points. Favourable teams, I think, is the way that, you describe it. On paper, teams generally in the bottom half of the table. We all kind of felt this could be a really nice run after a first kind of third to the season, first quarter of the season, which was very positive, but we were actually coming up against some quite difficult teams, going away to some big teams. Obviously having big teams at the Amex as well and getting results, we felt that this would be a chance, the real crunch time for the Albion season to see how the season would play out against ultimately, quote-unquote lesser sides or sides that at least you'd think at home particularly you'd expect Brighton, if they want to finish in the top 4, 6, 8, you'd expect them to be beating. But obviously we've had a very difficult run, obviously drawing with Southampton, a draw which ultimately, if we're being completely honest, probably should have been a loss. Obviously, we had the result at Leicester last weekend. Palace, an embarrassing defeat, 3-1 at the Amex on Sunday. And within that, there have been other results as well, which have been kind of less than flattering to the Albion. Of course, we picked up a win at Bournemouth not too long ago, probably about 2-3 weeks ago, which was a good result. But it's been a bit... I think lots of questions have been asked of Brighton and Hove Albion. A lot of questions have been asked of Fabian Hürzeler, and I think Brighton fans are asking a lot of questions now of the management, of the players. And I think we saw it particularly on Sunday after the game, on social media specifically, real toxicity, unbelievable levels of head loss, which I just thought were hilarious. But it was interesting, and it was. I think I wanted to make a video and I want to get into this over the next, 20 minutes or so, or however long we go for in this video. I could be here till midnight. Talking about kind of where it's gone wrong. Why do we think it's gone wrong? I'd love to know your thoughts, why you think it's gone wrong. I'm going to set it in a bit of context in my own opinion shortly, but, definitely things have changed and Brighton are getting some quite poor results at the moment. Performances aren't brilliant. But admittedly, it's a moment in time, and we know that, always with football, you go through periods in a season where you don't play as well, and I think this is clearly one of those for Brighton. It comes annoyingly just against, I think you'd say, teams where you would hope Brighton would be getting results. So I'm going to get into that, but please let me know in the comments. By the way, if you haven't already subscribed to this channel, please do subscribe to the channel. Drop a like on the video, drop a comment down below, and I want to hear why you think Brighton is struggling. Is it because of Hürzeler? Is it because of the players? Is it because of that age-old issue that Brighton have against lesser sides, so to speak? What is it, and how can we fix it? Because I think you're getting so many people offering their view on this is wrong, this is wrong, this is wrong, but there's no real solutions. I guess if we all knew the solution, we'd probably be sitting in the Albion dugout. But I think it's created a lot of debate, so I'd love to hear your opinion. So I'll get into it. I think I want to start with one of the more obvious ones, which I think, we spent a lot of money in the summer. We brought in a lot of players in the summer, £200+ million spent on players, on new players, a lot of them from foreign leagues, hardly any of them with Premier League minutes, young players specifically as well coming into the side. And I think you've got to say, this has probably been the summer, the biggest summer for 4 seasons in terms of player turnover for Brighton, particularly in terms of bringing players in and moving out that kind of old guard of players and personnel. Losing players like Adam Lallana as well, experienced pros. I think we have seen a shift in literally the personnel on the pitch. So of course I think in any instance that will take a while to, I don't want to say gel, because I think the team has gelled in the sense that we've seen them all play really well, and you can see that individually the performances we've seen from individual players have been fantastic. But I suppose what I mean by that is more that, I think when you have such a big turnover in players, you're not going to get that consistency all the time. I think, we don't know in the tough times really who quite the leaders are yet. We obviously know from the old guard who are your Steels, your Dunks, your Veltmans, your Milners, you would have been Lallanas, those kind of players. But, not all of those are on the pitch on Sunday, for example. We only had Dunk on the pitch out of those players. That we're not really seeing a team full of leaders, a team full of people who are perhaps comfortable in their position, in their role at the club, who are really adept at, and confident and just used to playing for Brighton. You see lots of players, lots of the new signings that we played, Rutter, Minteh, Weaver obviously coming off the bench. These aren't players that have been, stalwarts of the Albion side for years and years, or have been, they're players under the age of 24. Minteh 22, Rutter 22, Weaver 24. They're not players. Pedro 21. Okay, he's been here for a season already. These aren't players that are experienced pros and know how to get you through a period. I think always when you have the turnover of a squad, you're going to get that inexperience in the players that we've had, but also just you're going to get that inconsistency when you don't have a squad where everything is all tickety-boo and everyone's on the same page. And I think if we'd signed all these players, had this massive turnover, and were unbelievably consistent with our performances, and we'd gone and beaten all these teams, I think we'd be on for the title at this rate with the way that other teams are kind of slipping up in the division. So I think we've got to be a little bit realistic and kind of put that into context. I also think particularly with this squad as well, yes, we spent a lot of money, but it's not like this squad was the finished product. And I think I would be interested to know truly what the kind of expectation was from internally within the club, particularly when you're appointing a new manager, such a young manager as well, and bringing in a kind of raft of new players. Was the expectation to immediately kind of achieve top four in a season where we'd have to expect and hope that other teams would be slipping up? I think for me, if I'm going to be completely realistic about this, I would say that the form that we've shown this season is about a team that would finish, around 8th? Now, I think if you had said at the start of the season to a Tony Bloom, to a Fabian Hürzeler, to a Paul Barber, to a David Weir, what's your expectation for this season? What would be a good result? I think still, personally, despite all the money spent, I think still the club view a top half finish as a good result. I think 6th, or any form of European competition or major trophy perhaps, or a major final, would be a very good result for Brighton this season. Now, I think, we let's say we went into the kind of the middle of November in 2nd, 3rd, 4th place at one point. The form, and I've tried to say this to other Brighton fans, the form we've shown in terms of the slip-ups we've shown, the lack of quality that we've shown at times, the inability to get things over the line, matched with moments of brilliance, certain runs of brilliance, scoring loads of goals, playing really well in some games, that inconsistency probably is around suited to a finish of 6th to 9th. Now, let's be honest, that's probably what we all expected. So the only way I can truly justify in my head the reason why you might be annoyed, if you are annoyed, is did you really think that Brighton were going to win the league this season? Did you really think that Brighton were going to finish 4th this season? Because if you did, fair enough, then I understand why you're getting so many people on social media are getting so annoyed and so wound up and saying, Fabian's lost me all this stuff, this manager's naive, whatever. The season's over. This is typical Brighton. This isn't who we are. If you thought we were going to finish 2nd to 4th, then absolutely, that's right. But that's never the realistic aim of this club. No fan on the terrace, no genuine fan, and I would think who's realistic and thinking straightly would be thinking that Brighton's aim this season was to finish 2nd to 4th. Okay, an opportunity has maybe cropped up with the way that other clubs are playing. But if we're being completely honest about it, the way we're playing, the way we have played the seasons, the inconsistencies we've shown, we will probably finish 8th. I will put my neck on the line now. We will finish 8th. And I will say to you, that is a very, very good season, whereby we probably will sell 1 or 2 players this summer, maybe a Carlos Baleba, for example. However, we will have a squad which is settled into the Premier League, a young squad, an expensive squad that's assembled, which we can then go and achieve maybe a 5th. And I think next season, should be the one, particularly if they bolster again in the summer in terms of money spent, where you can say that actually, if they don't achieve a 4th, a 5th, a 6th, I mean, that feels insane saying that as a Brighton fan. Maybe that might be the point where you think if they don't achieve a 4th or a 5th or a 6th place finish, then that's where you can start losing your head. We've lost a game against Crystal Palace, for God's sake. Okay, that can happen in any season. That could happen in the... My memory of games is so bad. In the season we finished in Europe, I'm sure we probably didn't get the best result against Palace over both games. I think we might have drawn one and won one. It could have been very possible that we would have lost one against Palace. I don't think that is the game that defines your season. I understand that for many people, that is a massive, massive deal. However, I would take a loss against Palace if it meant that we were going to finish in a European position. Now, that might well still happen. What are we, 7th or 8th in the league as it stands? We're in a position where we can absolutely go and turn things around. We're not even halfway through the season yet. We can bolster in the January transfer window. But I think for people to say that Fabian Hürzeler needs to go, this squad isn't up to it. What was your expectation? What was the expectation of so many fans in this position? Because the way we're playing, the inconsistencies we're showing, the brilliance and then the kind of fragility that we're showing is probably around a side that's going to finish 8th. For a team like Aston Villa who finished 4th last season, they were pretty much, obviously they weren't faultless because they didn't get, 100% of the points won. But they were essentially, very, very... Nothing went wrong for them. They had a couple of big injuries, but they won most of their games. They looked a solid side. And I think that was so unrealistic to expect, particularly when we've lost... last year we lost 2 of our biggest midfielders, Alexis McAllister and Moises Caicedo. We didn't replace that last summer. And this summer was the summer where we felt like we were actually ready to replace them. We're now in a position with Carlos Baleba, Matt Sweefer, Yasin Ayari, Matt O'Reilly, where we have some top quality players in there. And this is the first season where, for example, that midfield is ready to go and take on the Premier League. Admittedly, some of these players do actually still need to get used to the league. So I think, there's so many aspects to this. We've got a Champions League front 4, front 5, front 6 with the depth that we've got. However, you can't expect kind of just the front 4 to get you the result you need. You need to have that whole team, and we don't have that yet. And that's unrealistic to expect. We've had a new manager come in, loads of new players. And I think we've got to view it in more of that context, that actually, with the change that we've seen, to lose a game against Crystal Palace and bottle a couple of leads, they could have easily been so different. The Wolves game, if that mistake wasn't made, it's literally snap decisions, moments in time, where if slight decisions were taken a little bit differently, we could be in a very, very different position. It's fine margins. And I think for everyone to kind of lose their cool completely, I'm not saying everyone has, but for many people I saw on Sunday night losing their cool over this, I think is pretty crazy considering the kind of expectation that we had for this season. I'm going to get on a bit later in the video to what many think is the main issue with Brighton at the moment, which is the naivety of Fabian Hürzeler. And I think among the fan base, I would probably say we're still at a kind of 70-30 confidence rate in terms of Fabian Hürzeler. However, I saw many pockets after the Palace game of people questioning Fabian Hürzeler. So I will address that because I think there definitely are naiveties within his management style and there's a lot for him to learn. But we'll get onto that later in the video. And, is he the main problem with Brighton and Hove Albion at the moment? I'd love to know your thoughts and get that in the comments. What I want to talk about now is the age-old problem that we tend to have against lesser sides, quote unquote, in the Premier League. It's been a story as old as time. In fact, I don't know why I even said the Premier League, because it's not a Premier League thing. This is a story from when I remember watching Brighton and Hove team, 15 years ago. This was an issue that we had then. It's a typical Brighton thing, and I particularly think now, for any club when you're in a transition of kind of becoming a kind of bottom half side to trying to have aspirations of kind of moving up the table, and particularly when you're a side who dominates possession like we do, I do feel like that's a problem you're going to have when teams essentially believe that you're quite good with the ball and can dominate games, and think that you might have the attacking talent to beat them. I think it's an approach that many teams take, sitting behind the ball and find it hard to break down. That's certainly a thing that we found hard to do on Sunday against Crystal Palace. It was another example of a team coming to the Amex, getting their goals in moments. I thought Palace played actually pretty well at times. But ultimately, their performance was based on a solid defence and an inability for us to break them down. And I think if we had broken them down, it would be a very different story. If the game was more open, it would be a very different story. I think, you got to think back to say that second goal we scored at Leicester was sort of on the break, wasn't it? Matt Weaver chucking the ball in behind for young keeper Minteh and him producing a moment of brilliance. We've never been a team in recent years who can kind of deal with players sitting behind the ball. You think back to last season, I think to a 1-1 draw with Sheffield United. There's so many of them that this season, Wolves, Ipswich at the Amex at the start of the season, there's literally so many examples of that where, okay, we might get a result, but actually we find it hard to be completely creative or kind of play in the best possible way. And it's a problem as old as time. How do Brighton fix that issue? I genuinely don't know. It's a problem that Man City have as well. They ultimately just wear these teams down. Of course, not so much recently with their poor run of form, but it's a problem where every club will essentially go to City, sit behind the ball for 90 minutes, and they'll, at some point, probably in the second half, break them down just through wear and tear of knocking the ball from left to right to left to right to left to right, peppering it around the goal, and then ultimately getting their goal. And I think and getting the results, So I think that's something that we need to get better at, because that's something that a lot of teams are coming to the Amex and doing. I find it incredibly annoying often watching Brighton because they try to do that. They try to break teams down who are just sitting on the edge of their box. But we don't, I don't think particularly last season, I don't think we were incisive enough to kind of break through those blocks at times. When a team comes and sits in a low block, we just haven't been incisive enough. And particularly at the Amex on Sunday, that was a problem that we had. I think a lot of the play was very sloppy. A lot of simple passes were getting cut out. I think players like Belabor, for example, he was having to really pick up the scraps after poor passes, winning the ball back, that kind of thing, obviously from his own part as well. But it's something that we saw on Sunday where simple passes weren't getting made. Palace were beating us to the ball in the air. I think it's simple stuff like that where if you want to break a team down, you need to be able to do the basics right. And, if you want to try and do intricate stuff outside the box, you've got to be making the right pass, and you've got to, not make mistakes. And I think that was something we've definitely found. So that's a problem as old as time for Brighton. And I think that's an element of what's gone wrong in recent weeks. You think some of the teams that have come to the Amex, Southampton, for example, we found it very difficult for them to break down. It felt like a game where we could have played till midnight and not got the result. Same with Palace as well, of course. They were very fortunate through their own good hard work as well, the good work on the ball, that they were able to get their goals. But I think it was another game where we could have played till midnight and we wouldn't have got a goal. They were just going to get their goals on the break and expose our kind of weaknesses at the back. So I think that's another issue that's playing into this kind of poor period for Brighton at the moment, which is essentially that we're a team which for a while has struggled to break teams down. And I think whichever manager in world football can kind of work out why that happens and how to break through that, I think will be a manager that wins titles. And obviously Pep Guardiola is one of those managers who can create a team that's able of doing that. We're not there yet. And I think I always come back to this point, like if we were able to do that, we would be top of the league. We would be in the Champions League. We would be winning these games and we'd be sitting in second right now. I think you've got to have a level of kind of realism to this. We're actually, we are Brighton, and we do have probably, in my opinion, the Champions League top 4 level kind of front 5 players in terms of the depth that we have. However, we're still only ourselves. If you want to finish at a certain level in the league, this is probably the kind of results that you'll get and the kind of difficulties that you'll find. I do also think the squad is still in a period of transition to an extent. I know, obviously, I was saying earlier that we've moved on quite a few players. We've brought in quite a lot of new players, but I still think we're in a period where there were players on that pitch who, in a year's time, might not be playing every week for Brighton. For example, Tariq Lamptey at right back. I think he was a player who impressed to an extent at Leicester, but I said it on a podcast, Seagulls Central, last weekend. Ultimately, for me, he's not a player who will be at the club in a year's time. I think he doesn't have the quality to be part of a Brighton starting 11, which will take us to where we need to be. You saw him getting beaten in the air for the second Palace goal, I think it was. And I always feel more comfortable with a player like Joel Veltman at right back. Realistically, long term, is he going to be a player that's going to be at right back for Brighton? Probably in his early 30s now. I love him and he should absolutely stay at the club and sign a new extension. He is a massive part of this side. However, he's another aspect. And I think Lewis Dunk as well. We are at a point now where there are question marks around Lewis Dunk. You saw it particularly for the third goal for Crystal Palace and the offside goal that they... no, it wasn't offside. The Eddie Nketiah chance as well. I think he's found wanting at a moment. Obviously, the period where he was out injured was a period where we were picking up some good results. Igor and Van Hecke looked brilliant. I'm not convinced fully about the level that Igor can get to and play at. However, I do think we looked more solid. I'm not going to sit here and say that Dunk's washed. You saw a lot of the kind of social media rhetoric after the game yesterday. Loads of people criticising Dunk. However, I do think we're beginning to see the end of Lewis Dunk. And I think it's important that we do manage that well, because ultimately he's still a massive leader, a fantastic ball player for Brighton. But I think maybe he'd be more suited to a 3 now. That could be interesting to see how Fabian Hürzeler would maybe transition to that. Whether that would be something that we could maybe work on to kind of help him a little bit more. Although I think when we've seen that, we haven't looked brilliant so far under Hürzeler in a 3. I think ultimately, long term, we're going to have to be looking at another centre-back. Our defence is looking pretty weak, if we're being completely honest about it. Jan-Paul Van Hecke and Pervis Estupiñán, the two that you'd only say get into a... If you were to build kind of a new Brighton starting back line, you'd probably only put those two in. You'd probably be looking for another centre-back to come in long term and a new right-back. Obviously, we have Veltman, we have Dunk, but I think it's important that in January we do that looking. Obviously, it's not something that we're going to necessarily go out and be able to get the targets we want, and it might not be January. It might have to be in the summer, but I think it's interesting. I think I hope Brighton do manage Lewis Dunk well over the next year or so, because I think he's definitely got a part to play at the club. I think absolutely he's one of our best defenders still. I absolutely stand by that. I think he should retire at the club, and I think he's still got the qualities of Premier League footballer to be at the club in 2-3 years' time. However, I think ultimately, if we're being completely honest, the form we've seen in recent weeks is showing me, and I would love him to bounce back from it. And I think we've seen that he's capable of it, and the leadership qualities he brings are brilliant. I believe that long term, that's something that needs dealing with. And I think if we want to push on into that top 4, I think we need another Jan-Paul Van Hecke realistically. And I think what I'd love to see in the next few weeks is someone like a Rory McConville coming into the side, even just off the bench in a 3, in the cup, whatever. Maybe at Norwich away. I'd love to see an opportunity for someone like him, because you never know what you've got in your own ranks until you play them. And I'm not saying that he would be a Dunk successor in the immediate term, absolutely not. But I think lots of people are thinking we need to go out and replace centre-backs. I'd love to see if he had the opportunity to step in, whether he'd be able to step up, because he looks like a Hürzeler player. He looks like a typical Brighton DNA, quote-unquote, player. So, where that leaves Lewis Dunk in the long term, he's going to be a player who's going to have a part to play the season. He's probably going to start most games until the rest of the season. I think it would be a massive call for Fabian Hürzeler to drop him from the side. I think he could potentially risk eroding a bit of goodwill within the Brighton fan base, and maybe even the Brighton playing squad if he were to do that. However, I think if you're looking at performances recently, Dunk hasn't been at his best. He's looked slightly lacking. So it's a conversation that we need to continue having, because I think it's something that needs to be monitored, this level of performance where he's not producing the performances he was. Can he turn it around? I think there's an opportunity for him to do that. But he's not the only one, and I think that's why I wanted to speak about it here, because I think it's an unfair scapegoating to a certain extent, whereby he's not the only one in the Brighton side who isn't performing and is looking a little bit shaky. Admittedly, our defence is a big part at the moment of what's looking shaky. And it was looking a bit better when Igor was in, but I don't think it's as simple as just saying it's Lewis Dunk. And then we'll move on to the kind of main man himself, Fabian Hürzeler, and the extent to which he is the issue with the way Brighton are playing at the moment. And is he the main reason why things have gone wrong for Brighton in recent weeks? Now, on Sunday after the game at the Amex, as I said earlier, his future and his the problem with his management was being highlighted quite a lot. The inexperience that he has was being brought up a lot. And you saw a fair few fans talking about whether, his time's up at the Albion, and whether he's lost the fan base, lost some of the players. Now, for me, that's absolutely insane, some of that chat about Hürzeler. Absolutely insane. I think that is prime Brighton and Hove Albion head loss. That is generational head loss from the Brighton fan base there. We've got a manager who's come in who's 31 years old. The club have taken a massive gamble on this, okay? You can say that Brighton have spent 200 million quid in the summer, so they would want performances that reflect that in terms of the players they brought in. But if we're being completely honest, we brought in players who are very young, some of them even from the Championship like Rutter, players who haven't played Premier League minutes before, amongst a squad which is still in transition with players perhaps need moving on or getting out of the team. And we're bringing a 31-year-old manager, a massive story at the time, and you think that he is the main problem. The club would not have appointed Fabian Hürzeler expecting him to not go through a period like this. That is literally the opportunity that you give a Brighton manager. You think back to Graham Potter, what was it, 1 home win, 2 home wins in the whole of 2020? You would not get that opportunity at any other club. Fabian Hürzeler, in my book, has to do a lot more to show me that he doesn't have my faith anymore. Now, I do agree to an extent. My own personal view is that the jury is still out on Hürzeler, on whether he has the chops, so to speak, to be a Premier League manager that can get Brighton into the top 4. I think he is benefiting from, as all Brighton managers do, Roberto De Zerbi does, Graham Potter did as well, the brilliant setup at Brighton, the system that's there for you to succeed, the players that you have for you to succeed. Brighton have a fantastic squad. I think pound for pound, player for player, they have a squad which probably is about 6th in the league, 7th in the league. It's a very, very good squad, and some aspects of that squad are really even better than that. However, he's given... I get that point, that he's been given the tools to do well, as all of the Brighton managers have. But I think De Zerbi had his flaws as well. Absolutely, he had his flaws. You think about the way we'd get pumped in games. I always think back to that Fulham game. There was a Bournemouth game as well where we just got pumped. We go 2 goals down, it becomes 4 goals down. And I understand with Hürzeler, maybe we do have a bit of a mentality issue that his inexperience and youth maybe hasn't been able to deal with yet, which is when we concede a goal, we often concede another goal. And we're showing that sign as well. But that wasn't exactly a problem that we weren't seeing under De Zerbi, for example. We could lose games 4-0 under De Zerbi. This was our first home defeat of the season. You've got to remember that. And the first game of the season where we've lost the game by a significant margin, and it's against our rivals. My issue with Hürzeler isn't that he's lost my faith at all. My issue more is that I'm not 100% sure of his style of play. Now, maybe someone might level at me that that's my kind of lack of tactical acumen or whatever. But I remember you saw it with Potter because it was such a stark difference to Chris Hughton. You saw it with De Zerbi because his was a real lighting of the touch paper compared to Graham Potter. The electricity of the football under De Zerbi and the kind of highs and lows of it was brilliant to watch, chaotic almost. Hürzeler's come in, and I do struggle to see it. I think the midfield, despite having players like Baleba who've been fantastic, I think the midfield has looked quite weak at times. It's looked like we almost don't play a midfield at moments, and I'm not one who kind of digs into tactics so much, so maybe that's an aspect of it. But I'm struggling to see what the style of play is under Hürzeler. It kind of feels like we've just got a lot of good players who are going out there and just kind of putting in good performances, and they're fantastic players, fantastic young players, technically brilliant players, because that's what the club have built in terms of the playing squad, and you put them all together and they do pretty well. Now, maybe that's really harsh on me, but I think that coupled with the kind of in-game lack of game management that we're seeing, the inability to shut up shop completely, the inability to make the right decisions. Now, we can weigh up the extent to which, is that a personal player aspect? Is that Igor running out of the back against Leicester in the last game last weekend and ultimately giving a goal away? Well, that's not on Hürzeler, but maybe culturally that is on Hürzeler, I suppose, is the question I'm asking. Is that around the way he's setting up, the decisions he's making, the substitutions he's bringing on? I think you'd say with Hürzeler, I think you've seen him make positive substitutions in terms of bringing on players attacking-wise. I don't think in terms of games where we've been up against the cosh a little bit, maybe we've got a lead and we're trying to defend it, I don't think he's made the right tactical decisions then. I've not seen that. Now, I remember saying to one of my friends earlier in the season that I can, in a weird way, this was in the summer, I can weirdly imagine something going wrong for Hürzeler and us parting ways with him in like December. Now, obviously that's not going to happen, but I think that maybe spoke to the kind of worry that we all had, which is, okay, we're making a brilliant start to the season, but how much of this is Hürzeler? And when the tough times come, is he going to be able to kind of turn the tide? And is he going to be able to have that nous to turn it around? One thing that I find interesting is I saw him at Leicester when we were 2-0 up in the 85th minute. He sat there on the sidelines laughing away to his coaching staff. That kind of you've got to be concentrated 100% of the time and aware of the fact that games can turn on a penny at any point. And I think we saw that at times at the Amex on Sunday. Does he know how to turn the tide when we go a fluky goal down, or we go even a fluky 2 goals down? How do you turn that around? And we've not seen that yet from Hürzeler. Now, for me, a lot of it is still on the players. I do think that. I think we were sloppy against Crystal Palace, and I don't think how much of that, I'm unsure how much of that is the manager, that the manager can actually prevent that from happening. Obviously, long term that is, and if you lose a dressing room, that might create that style of play. But I don't think that Hürzeler is causing us to be outside the box, knocking the ball around, and then just making poor passes. I don't think that is on Hürzeler. So I think, for me, absolutely the jury's out. There are questions still to be asked about whether he is an elite manager, but he's 31 years old. He's never managed in the Premier League before. He's getting used to the fact that every game in the Premier League is really difficult. There are no given games in the Premier League. The expectation is high at Brighton at the moment. You wouldn't think it given the kind of stature of the club, but expectation is high amongst the fans at the moment. I think lots of fans come to the Amex expecting Brighton to win every game because they're used to that. The new generation of fans seeing Brighton only being successful. I hate to say it, probably a lot of tourists in the crowd as well expect that level of Brighton just to come and they don't. The fan base doesn't always show up in terms of geeing the team on and trying getting the team over the line. I think there's a level of expectation that we see in the crowd as well and among the fan base. And I think there's so many more aspects to it than Hürzeler. I think seeing tweets by people saying they're losing faith in Hürzeler or they've lost faith in him is ridiculous, because how can you say that after only 4, 5, 6 months of the season? How many games are we in? I'm not sure, 15 games or something into the season? It's insane. We've not seen enough to show that he's not got the chops. We've gone through a period of 4 games where things haven't been brilliant. And if we're being completely honest, it's probably about where we should be if we want to finish 8th. Provided we can turn it around. I think we will turn it around. You always see this in the season where your team goes through a difficult period. But I just find it ridiculous that people are losing faith in Hürzeler already. Have some faith, man, for God's sake, and realise who we are as a club and what the expectations are for this season. If you thought because we signed Rutter for 40 million and Kadioglu for 25 million, that means that we're finishing top 4, I mean, geez Louise, man. Come on. So, we're going into a big period now. West Ham away, Brentford at home Boxing Day, or the day after Boxing Day. I think, Arsenal's coming up. We've got Chelsea in the new year as well. So there's some big games where we might struggle. I think bouncing back at West Ham's going to be massive because, if it becomes I just think I can see the fan base getting very, very annoyed. But as always with the away fan base, I'll be there at West Ham. The away following is always fantastic. They'll be right behind the team. No one in that away concourse, I imagine, will be kind of critical of Hürzeler. My God, no. I think it's pockets, and I think maybe this video, maybe I am in danger of kind of overstating it a little bit. But it's one to watch. I think absolutely the jury's still out. But there are other problems. There's personnel problems. There's a long-term issue against kind of teams in a low block. There's the fact we've got a new squad. I think there's a level of expectation in the fan base which is too high at the moment in terms of what do you really expect for this season. I think there's so many aspects to it beyond something just like Hürzeler that we'll just have to see how it plays out for the rest of the season. But anyway, thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate you tuning in. Let me know, what do you think is going wrong for Brighton at the moment? Do you think it is Hürzeler? If you think it's Hürzeler, let me know. Give me the case. Do you think it's players like Lewis Dunk making mistakes? Do you think it's the wrong system we're playing? Do you think it's the fact we've got a new squad? Do you think it's fan expectation? Drop me in below your thoughts. I'd love to know what you think. And thank you for watching. As always, if you enjoyed this video, please subscribe to the channel. I try and post as regularly as I can, reacting to events at the club, reacting to games. You can listen to me on as a podcast as well. If you go on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, you'll be able to listen to me there. And I will be back maybe this week, maybe after the West Ham game. Turn your notification bell on, and you'll see all of my uploads on every platform that you like. And I will see you very, very shortly. And as always, up the Albion.